So, hey, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. Thanks for taking some time of your day to join us. See, we've still got a few people coming through the waiting room, but we'll get things started anyway. We've got a few bits of housekeeping to kick off, and then I'll be handing over to our panel chair and panelists for the discussion today. Having spoken with our panelists over the last few weeks, I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. Looking forward to the conversation. I hope we can leave you with a bit of a state of play of where industry is currently at in terms of their interesting COVID-related research and the sort of lessons they've learned over the last year and the approaches that they're taking to working with universities around partnerships and commercialisation. And yeah, before we get started, just a few quick things in terms of housekeeping. So I'll shortly hand over to our panel chair for today, who's Robin, one of Impart's two co-founders. Robin will then invite each of our panelists on to give a quick introduction to themselves and the sort of overview of the story of how their companies have responded to the pandemic over the last year. Then we'll start the Q&A with a few questions we've prepared and received in advance, and then we'll open up to the attendees for a live Q&A. And yeah, as you probably all know by now, you can direct your questions through the Q&A pop-up down in the bottom corner. And we have started recording the webinar. We'll share this around first thing next week, and you feel free to share that with any colleagues. And some of you probably have seen, with this webinar, we're testing out a live transcript for closed captions for those who require it, but you can toggle that on and off as and when you need to. So I think that's everything from me. So yeah, Robin, if you want to bring yourself in and take things away.
Thanks, Alex. Hopefully you're showing up there. That's all good. Yeah, great. It's my pleasure to be chairing today's webinar with our three panelists. Before we sort of get started and I guess dig into things, it would just be useful, I guess, for me to briefly introduce myself, our company, for those of you who aren't familiar with Impart and what we do, and that really provides a bit of a rationale about the webinar and why we're having this discussion today. So, in terms of myself, as Alex mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Impart. My background's actually in immunology and virology, with a brief stint in industry, and we started Impart 7 to 8 years ago with the idea of helping facilitate the connection between research coming out of universities and research institutions with industry partners. So individuals who work in industry that are looking to commercialize new research or collaborate with researchers, all in a view to bringing research out of the lab and into usable products, technologies, therapies, etc. So we've been working, well, Impart's been going for about 7 to 8 years, as I mentioned. We have about 250 universities globally that use our online platform to showcase research that's seeking commercial partners, as mentioned. And we have about 6,000 companies that engage our system and look for content for commercialization. And by using Impart, they can connect with those institutions behind the research. The main individuals we work with at universities globally are the tech transfer teams and officers. I'd like to say hi to those that have joined us today, as well as those in research commercialization generally. And so I suppose to bring it back to the webinar, when the pandemic first started a year ago or so, I guess we kind of sat in Impart and just thought, what can we do? How can we help in that global response to the challenges that COVID-19 were presenting, and found ourselves in privileged position sat between university research and our network of companies that were looking to translate research. So we decided to launch an open call for research globally, and that would be wide open to all universities, regardless of whether they were subscribed or not, to bring on research that could help basically eradicate COVID, or certainly indirectly help in the response to the pandemic, and showcase that to companies using our system. So that happened last April. It went really well. We got about 160 submissions within a month or two, all focused on COVID and how we can stem the challenge of the pandemic. And within that period, we sparked about 60 conversations with industry for the commercialization of that research. So that went really well. And now, 2 weeks ago, we've reopened that system again, because I guess we're sat thinking this was really good, but COVID is still dominating our lives, as we all know. we're all sat in positions where it's a daily it's a daily term for us all, and it's still very much not gone. So we're reopening that call for research globally, and we were asking ourselves, what do industry want? How have they coped with the pandemic so far? Have their needs changed? And what can we tell our university community in research commercialization, as well as academics, what industry is searching for? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'll shortly invite the panelists to come in and introduce themselves. And today we're going to be covering essentially what their companies sort of did initially during their introduction, how they coped with the pandemic when it first started out. And then we want to discuss their current priorities, what they're searching for at the moment, have they changed? And then finally, just looking at how the pandemic has affected the way in which they are partnering with universities and academics. Thereafter, we'll open the Q&A, so please do use that. And just before I begin to invite the panelists to do that introduction about themselves and their company, etc., we'd just like to thank the excellent team at PraxisAuril who've supported our open call for research in COVID-19 and also highlighting this webinar to their membership. So just to say thanks there. So without further ado, Alex Maloney from Tocris, if you're able to unmute yourself and switch on your video, if that's okay, that would be great if you can give us an introduction about yourself, your company, and your response to COVID when that happened about a year ago.
Great, thanks, Robin. Firstly, thanks to Impart for inviting me to this panel discussion. Really looking forward to seeing what pans out and answering some of your questions. It's fantastic to see what Impart do, drawing that line between industry and academia, and sort of making that academic value realized. So yeah, great to be a part of the discussion. So yeah, I'm Alex Maloney. My background is a PhD in molecular biology. I work for Tocris, who are the small molecules arm of the umbrella company Bio-Techne. Tocris have been providing small molecules to researchers for over 30 years. We have an extensive amount of experience in this area. And our portfolio consists of around about 5,000 compounds. We take extreme pride in our brand. We are proud of our kind of product quality and ensuring that we can deliver sort of the consistently high quality reagents to researchers. Part of what we do is to license these compounds. We have hundreds of licenses with academic, biotech and pharma partners, just to ensure that we have the most innovative and up-to-date products. I'm a product specialist here, so my role is identifying these products. And I have formed part of the innovation team here. So as I mentioned, kind of our core business has been providing small molecules. Our innovation team has taken a slightly more innovative approach, if you like, to still pivot off our core business, but to look into some new areas. An example being targeted protein degradation, where we have a little bit more scope to not just be kind of providing the reagents, but also helping to develop and advance this field. A little bit about what we've done then in COVID. So I've been with the company now for just around 18 months, which you might sort of see coincides with just as the pandemic was starting. So this was an interesting time to be joining the company. Things were transitioning to home working. Our site is here in Bristol in the UK. And we have offices here, so I got a very brief look at what it was like, office life, and that was great. Able to kind of connect with all of the different departments here, supply chain, marketing, and that kind of interaction is really key. So adapting to an online way of doing that was interesting. On the Bristol site, we manufacture many of our compounds, so and we realized kind of we had a responsibility here of being able to carry on providing our compounds, and if we were to have any kind of sort of COVID transmission on site, that was going to be really bad, and kind of that could shut production down here, and in turn really prevent how we can serve our life sciences customers. So there was very much all office-based staff need to move away. Our chemists here in the labs, they transitioned to shift working. So things, we had to really adapt to this COVID change so that we could continue running the business. But there was a fantastic job done there by upper management. There was real sort of encouragement coming. Our CEO was delivering kind of weekly messages, keeping us updated on what was going on, what he knew, kind of keeping spirits high. So that was really good. But yeah, these are unprecedented times. Very, very strange, kind of joining a company at this point. But part of my role was looking at the COVID portfolio of products and introducing these to our range. Traditionally, infectious diseases wasn't a space where we had really introduced that many products. So initially, it was going back and having a look at some of the earlier SARS research and seeing, okay, well, what tool compounds here were identified that we don't have, and let's find out what they are and get those kind of put at the front of the queue, drop everything else we're doing, and get these to the front of the queue so that we can get them out in sort of as quick as possible. So that was kind of one of the first things that happened. In terms of some of the really new research that was coming out, we were in touch with kind of the lead academics here, and there was very much a need for speed and kind of getting the licenses through. Often there's a lot of paperwork that gets in the way of licensing, so it was really good to kind of try and expedite that process, realize the kind of common goal and making these tools available and getting them in a position where we can disseminate them globally. So that was kind of one of the ways that we have been involved. Another part of our portfolio has been screening libraries. We have sort of Fda Compound Libraries, and as I'm sure kind of many are aware, the repurposing of existing FDA approved drugs is something that's extremely appealing. One, the clinical data is there, the safety data is there, the dosing is known. So to find a drug that was already there and was kind of effective as an antiviral against SARS-CoV-2, was a really key target for research. So yeah, we made available our screens, and yeah, so just to reference some of kind of the early work that kind of fitted in with our business model as well. There was a fantastic publication from the group of Nevin Krogan, and this really highlights the kind of the need for speed. Within a few months of realizing that this was going to be a global pandemic, him and his group and other collaborators had expressed pretty much all of the viral proteins and mapped out the whole kind of human virus interactome. So now we didn't just have kind of viral proteins to target, but we knew all of the host, the human protein targets that they were interacting with. And our portfolio already had many of these human targets and inhibitors against these targets that could potentially be repurposed as well. So that was another area where we fitted into research. And yeah, with that, I'll kind of leave my intro there.
That's perfect. Cheers, Alex. That's awesome. Raymond, you're next on my screen if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and background, etc.
Hi, thanks Robin, and thanks Alex for inviting me from InPart and PraxisAuril as well. So my name is Raymond Chan. I'm a product manager at Biotechne. So kind of umbrella corporation. I'm colleagues with Alex, but I cover a different part of the company, cover R&D systems and Novus Biologicals. So I originally trained as a neuro-oncology researcher at Cambridge. Before that, worked in medical microbiology at Edinburgh, and then had experience at 3 other biotech companies, including another NASDAQ-listed company that specializes in infectious disease, IVD assays. So those were like molecular biology and immunoassay based tests. So Biotechne, in terms of the portfolio I manage, have about 150,000 antibodies. Like these are typically tool antibodies for research, as well as diagnostics and increasingly as therapeutic candidates as well. And we recently out-licensed an antibody to Xencor in California. That's a kind of third one we've done with them. That's more in kind of oncology field. So increasingly we pivoted into like the therapeutic space as well. But many of our tools are cited in the literature for the last 30 years and increasingly in coronavirus. So in terms of our tools, these are a range of proprietary and in-license research tools from both industry and academic institutes. So we partner with a lot of the TTOs already around the world. So I've been at the company now about 5.5 years, part of the COVID-19 product management team at Biotechne along with Alex. I also interact with our offices, mostly in our headquarters in Minneapolis, as well as subsidiaries in Denver, San Jose, Boston, and our European sites in France, Germany, Italy, and other parts of the world. So in terms of the kind of shift, how we responded to the pandemic, I guess in the early days, we were kind of figuring out, this novel coronavirus, right? So we didn't know a lot about the effect of the virus, but as Alex mentioned, our CEO had a kind of weekly updates to the entire global team, was about 2,300 people. So the kind of first priority was really making COVID secure our sites. So there's a big shift from for the people who are like not in the lab, so remote working. So a lot of the teams were, immediately working from home, and those who needed to be in the lab to, do R&D or production or QC. There's a big shift to shift working. So this included like weekend working, nighttime working. So it was a real effort to kind of make sure people were socially distant and making sure that we were still manufacturing tools and our instruments, and like everybody else, we were fighting, COVID, especially in the US when that started to really kind of rocket. So there was a real drive on like being careful, mask wearing. And it so happens a lot of our management team came from 3M. So, we had real emphasis on mask wearing, and even before all the evidence was accumulating, that mask wearing was really important to curb infection, and that, even now there's kind of controversy around it, is it airborne? And that kind of transmission. And there's now, even in the UK, we're seeing the government's trying to tell secondary schools not to wear masks. So a lot of that evidence is not really grounded in the science. So there's a lot of obviously politics that have been thrown into the mix. But however, I think our guidance has been really consistent throughout, which is really nice. Kind of what also helped, we had a lot of talks from leading coronavirus researchers and clinicians. So we had internal COVID-19 seminar series. So this included real world leaders in, for example, long COVID. So we kind of really understand what are the long-term health effects of being infected, and then talks about the vaccine development. And more recently, we've had a vaccine drive. So we brought in the vaccines into our sites so we can vaccinate our teams in certain US states. So I think another challenge really at the outset of the pandemic was really synthesizing the masses of preprints, right? This is kind of a feature of the pandemic. It's just a huge outpouring of information from all across the world, a lot of it non-peer reviewed. But one of the key papers that came out was looking at the ACE2 receptor from Germany, actually published in Cell, using one of our blocking antibodies for ACE2. And that was kind of where we kind of pivoted into the space, because we already had this ACE2 antibody with a kind of functional property. And so the role of academia has been really critical, I think, stemming back to when actually the sequence was first released from in China, from the Shanghai Public Health Institute, and that was released by University of Sydney. And I think that was really the kind of trigger for all the the research, the vaccine development, diagnostic development, was really the release of that on the kind of viral genome database. But I think just to mention quickly some of our collaborations that have been ongoing. These are kind of a range of informal and more formal collaborations. These have included with the University of Maryland for infected SARS-CoV-2 lysate that have been really useful in some of our assay development, through to US AMRID with a viral pseudotyping assay with some of our blocking antibodies. Working with La Jolla Institute, they've got a coronavirus immunotherapy consortium called COVIC. So we contributed some of our neutralizing antibodies into that consortium. Through to more locally in Cambridge, there's a spin-out called Diocinvax, working with Jonathan Heaney's team. So they're working on a kind of a next generation coronavirus vaccine that aims to kind of stop all coronaviruses. So we had a kind of instrument collaboration with them, which is really great, and that's kind of expanded out to the NHS Innovate UK funded human immunity consortium in Cambridge as well. And one other one worth mentioning was a kind of research paper with Mass General. Our Chief Medical Officer Rob Monroe contributed to a genomics paper with NanoString, looking at the host response to SARS-CoV-2 pulmonary infection. So we're also publishing with academia as well, and I know there's a lot of discussion about when academia and industry partners together. I think you featured this in the blog post, that the impacts are a lot bigger, and they get more read and more impressions. So I think that has been really a fruitful kind of collaboration. And probably one other one I'll leave for later is kind of our partnership with Mount Sinai and their spin-out company Cantaro. But I think I'll stop for now.
No, that's great, Ray, and a lot of interesting collaborations already established. So I think for the next question, or the question to be asked about what next, that's going to be interesting. But Michelle, if you'd like to turn on your video and unmute yourself, that'd be great to hear your intro as well.
Sure, thanks, Robin, and thanks to Impart as well for inviting me. I'm working in a different business than the other guys. I work at MSD, also known as Merck in the United States. It's a big pharmaceutical company, 74,000 people, and I'm working in the global business development and licensing team. So basically responsible for scouting and scientific evaluation of different opportunities to augment the pipeline of the company. We are based in London, at least I'm based in London with a small team, and we cover Europe and Middle East, and that way we have different groups that cover different geographic areas in the world. So what we did in COVID is a lot, and everything that Raymond already mentioned in terms of getting the company ready for working under COVID circumstances, all that type of things is clearly also taking place in probably every company that's still active and has active manufacturing or development ongoing. But what we did early on in the pandemic is, that started probably in February last year, we formed a core group within business development activities, and every week this core group would group together with a special core team, which is comprised of different scientists and specialists in the areas of small molecules and biologicals, in vaccines, of course, and then also across the different stages of development. So from preclinical discovery up to biology, safety assessment, early clinical, late clinical, regulatory. So we had this sort of matrix group organization where every week we would discuss the most important opportunities that the BDNL group would scout and would evaluate, and we would discuss then on the spot like what we would like to bring forward for serious discussions. And that group also helped us in terms of the assessment of the different opportunities. And you can imagine in the very early start, nobody really knew yet what was going on. There was a lot of activity around repurposing, as Alex already mentioned. There was also a very early start with some of the vaccines, which started to deliver some results even already around March, April. So there was a lot of high-pace activity, so to say, in terms of the opportunities that were presented throughout the world. And from the total group, so throughout the world, we evaluated roughly 150 different vaccines and vaccine candidates. A lot of them were from academia, a lot of them were also from companies. Eventually, we transacted on 2 vaccines. One is with a research institute called IAVI. The other one was through an acquisition of an Austrian company called Themis Bio. And next to vaccines, we looked at immunomodulators, probably around 100 or so we saw, and we evaluated same counts for small molecule direct antivirals. There were about 150 of them that we've seen, and we also screened about 80 to 100 different monoclonal antibodies, and ultimately we didn't do anything in that space because there was so much overlap and such little differentiation between them. But most of these, not most of these, but a lot of these came from academia and research institutes, and there were different ways that we got hold of them. Raymond already mentioned the pre-publication, the bio archives and that type of preprints. That we could then reach out to the organizations. Some of them reached out to us, the TTOs reached out. Of course, through InPart, we also got visibility on what was happening. And in addition to what we also did in pipeline activities, we also looked, of course, very carefully at what research tools do we need and were available. For example, some plasmids that were for coronaviruses that were useful for our toolbox for the research and development. We set up research collaborations. We took some licenses to some of those, but also other tools like different models. For example, the hamster model for challenge studies, different technologies. So really, in a nutshell, we looked at practically all the different aspects or facets that can be offered through academia and research institutes to really serve the pipeline and ultimately returning into positive products. So, and I think as an introduction, that's where I leave it for now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So if I can just ask Alex and Ray to rejoin, I guess, video-wise, then we can just crack off with that first question, which is, and I suppose starting with you, Michelle, that's, an incredible, don't know if you call it like a pivoting response, but certainly in academia, there was that pivot in research to being completely focused on COVID, etc. But what a lot of assessment. And I guess to ask that first question to you about Merck and your current interests from a research perspective for our audience and what they might have within their portfolio, etc.
Yep.
And maybe just to comment on that's such a large amount of evaluation, that core development team with the weekly briefs and what's currently hot, etc. Is all that still going on? Are you still having that level of internal engagement to differ your scouting priorities? And do they still lie in those same buckets, or are you slightly now like, well, we're not looking at vaccine technology anymore, we need to focus more here? If you could just give us your comment on the ongoing response from Merck and current interests.
That's a good one. I'll start with the latter, and then I'll go to what we're working on at the moment or looking for, really. So the intensity of the interactions has reduced. We're now meeting once a month. Still, every COVID opportunity that we spot, we had a deadline of 3 days for our assessments and getting back to the organization with our feedback. That is sort of still in place. We try to still 3 to 5 days turnaround time. So that hasn't really changed. We now, of course, have a much better understanding of the virus, of the disease course, of what's in development, where are the obvious gaps still. So the areas of interest have changed and have shifted and have been adapted. And what we are currently much more focused on is the future. We have a phase 3 molecule, which is direct antiviral in development still. There are a couple of immunomodulators. We had one that we actually stopped further development last month. The vaccines we halted as well, and all because we didn't see a clear differentiating profile from them that we actually thought you would require to make an impact on top of some of the companies that were earlier than us, for example, Pfizer, BioNTech, for example, AstraZeneca, J&J. And at the moment, we are still supporting J&J in the manufacturing. But what we're still working on internally, as well as looking forward, as I mentioned, is the future. And the future is more thinking of like pan-corona strategies, all the variants that are around. So if you think of a package that we would like to see, whether it's a direct antiviral or a vaccine, we definitely would need to see that it ticks those boxes. So talking about challenge models, for example, earlier, we would like to see some early proof of biology, a proof of concept in those newer technologies and newer molecules. And if you think about vaccines specifically, we have a couple of good vaccines, but clearly a pan-coronavirus vaccine also being sort of future-proof would be on top of our list, together with a vaccine that has demonstrated activity against all the different variants that are currently circulating. And we are looking for different attributes as well, like, for example, a vaccine that can be stored at room temperature, that can be given as a single shot, that can be given intranasally or orally. So those type of attributes that really can change the field and move it again and make sure that we get to patients' ease to the future in Corona, but because it's still ongoing, and I think we will still be a couple of years with us before we start to see it as a normal thing.
Yeah, certainly. No, that makes a lot of sense. So it's that pan-corona is your focus currently. It doesn't mean that those elements are off the table when it comes to vaccines, etc., in that technology, but it needs to be sustainable into the future and be able to sort of, I guess, take on any threats from different variants, etc.
Yes.
Great. And certainly for the following question, the 3 to 5 day turnaround time is really interesting on your review process. So we'll save that one for the next piece. But Ray, if I just keep walking back down the line, as it were, current sort of focus at Biotechne, and is it still the same? Are you sort of still operating that similar, I guess, outlook to individuals that want to use your tools, etc.? And what are your current research focuses for academics, tech transfer teams, etc., that you might want to be reviewing currently?
Sure. I guess, like as Mikhail mentioned, the intensity's gone down in terms of the demand for tools. At the beginning, there weren't many well-validated tools out there, so people were scrambling for finding antibodies, plasmids, proteins, immunoassays. We still get those kind of requests in, and we see those kind of be cited. So I think we have a kind of a unique viewpoint about Biotechne because we support all researchers around the world, like including all industry verticals, like all the big pharma companies, all the small and large biotech, and all the academics. So we kind of have a view of what targets and what things are really interesting for people. So I think we, well, just kind of going back a little bit, like our Novus Biologicals brands actually started working on antibodies to SARS in early 2000s. So we were already in this space. So we were kind of in a way trying to repurpose our original SARS antibodies by looking to see if they were cross-reactive to SARS-CoV-2. So in the early days, we saw some papers from the CDC validating it, from Harvard, and then we got requests from other researchers saying, hey, we want to use that tool because the CDC has validated it, and places like Harvard as well. So we have seen our tools being used by quite a number of vaccine developers as well, and some of those are still in an academic stage. For example, there's a Nature paper from KU Leuven published in Nature. It was actually a live attenuated virus using one of our Novus antibodies and our simple Western automated Western blotting system. So yeah, I think one of the trends we've seen is that kind of demand for doing things quicker. So that's where we've had a lot of interest in our automation tools. So instead of doing a Western blot for a day or two, you can do it in 3 hours. We have an automated ELISA system, this kind of microfluidic system that a lot of the researchers actually came to us in the early days, and they said, hey, we want to use this tool in the clinical setting. And we actually fought really hard about it, saying these are like actually research tools. But because the demand was so enormous, because of the whole problem of cytokine storm, we designed these panels, these cytokine storm panels, which was published by Mount Sinai, their human immune monitoring center in Nature Medicine, and there's some centers in Europe. So we actually saw a lot of ways that our tools were being used by clinicians and academics in ways that we didn't, develop them for. So they qualified them, and we actually shipped out some of these instruments for free because we just wanted to help the cause and help fight the pandemic. So I think that was something that we didn't really talk about. Like we wanted to be a collaborator. A lot of this discussion right now about not-for-profits or kind of low royalty or no royalty. So we have, even though we're for profit, we still really want to support the cause. So those are some of the stories that we maybe didn't really talk a lot about in the early days. And some of those collaborations that we coined, there's no money exchanging hands. It's purely, a collaboration with academia, or this kind of, we want to help you and they'll help us. And so that's been one of the really interesting things about the pandemic, is those collaborations have been very varied. Not, some of them are completely non-structured. There's no binding agreement whatsoever. It's purely gentleman's agreement, which is really nice. So we've seen also more structured agreements as well. Like, we've partnered with Mount Sinai. They actually span out a company called Cantaro, working with Renalytics. We were the kind of manufacturing partner for their sortical assay. And we worked together to take it through the FDA to get EUA as well as CIVD marking. So I think we're still really interested in diagnostics, but maybe, there's so many. If you look at the kind of pipeline, there's like hundreds of serological and molecular assays. I think half of them from China, and another quite a lot from Europe and the US. So there's a whole flood of these diagnostic tests out there. But one of the interesting things, one of my observations, was the rise of COVID-19 biotech. So some of the academics have actually, or the TTOs have actually commercialized some of these findings by, spinning out a company. One of the examples is in Oxford. There was a company called Oxed, which was kind of not-for-profit social COVID biotech testing company. They actually got acquired by Prenetics in Hong Kong, but their whole ethos was, not for profit. So that's kind of a really interesting model.
Yeah.
I think that I've seen, and I think that's, yeah.
Just quickly, Ray, I was just going to wonder. You have a lot of collaborations established already. Just very quickly, I suppose there's space for more. Basically, like there's no kind of limit for biotechny, as it were. I'm just thinking, is there still that?
Yeah, I think we're, like, as Mikhail alluded to, we're like looking beyond. Like, COVID's going to still be around for, probably years to come. This endemic. And we know we're kind of preparing for the next pandemic, but our core is really immunology. So we're actually, pivoting back to releasing tools for immunological research, IO, neuroscience. So we're very broad, but our core is really immunology.
Sure.
So, but we're still really interested in the proposals from academia and TTOs.
Great, excellent. And then Alex, any sort of comments on current interests in terms of technology you're seeking, research that's of interest for Tocris at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Michelle said, like we're very kind of different businesses. MSD, obviously one of the pharma giants here, and we really, particularly at Tocris, are trying to support kind of the researchers. So yeah, infectious diseases, kind of as I mentioned, was a very underrepresented area for us. So I'm really looking to kind of continue developing a research arsenal, if you like, so tools that can be used as both Ray and Michelle have said, for the next pandemic that's will inevitably come. But it's fantastic to see how kind of big pharma is clubbing together now. Learning from sort of previous mistakes we had. Obviously, the warning shots in 2003 with SARS-1, and then in kind of later on then with MERS coming, and still our kind of shelves were bare for coronavirus antivirals. So and from what I've been seeing, the likes of Jay Bradner at NIBR are really kind of taking sort of a lead in making sure that this doesn't happen again, and working kind of pan coronavirus antivirals. But in terms of kind of the particular targets and things that we have been looking at and stocking our shelves with, if you like, has been in kind of key areas of viral replication, viral cell entry. So in replication, Michelle mentioned as well earlier their phase 3 drug, this molnupiravir. I mean, that looks fantastic. So remdesivir was obviously the first FDA approved drug specifically for coronavirus, but this there were obviously a few kind of things that matured with that made it not a great drug. It was very well positioned. I know the NIH had been involved in in looking at some coronavirus drugs kind of back in 2017. So it had shown efficacy in coronavirus models, and had subsequently been used in the treatment of Ebola. So it was very well positioned to kind of be there as a drug to treat coronavirus. But yeah, kind of seeing this sort of next generation, this molnupiravir, I think that was very exciting to see. But yeah, there's so many targets, especially viral proteins, and they kind of keep appearing. We've only kind of found inhibitors for a few of them. You know, Pfizer having kind of the first one that's progressed to the clinic for the main protease. But in the replication transcription complex, there's not just the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which remdesivir is targeting, but there's helicases, there's exonucleases involved in the proofreading, and these are all undrugged targets. So you know, having small molecule inhibitors for these is going to be key to develop our kind of research arsenal, if you like. So always kind of keeping ear to the ground, setting up alerts. You know, I see kind of the structures are being solved, really nice structures, like cryo-EM has done such a good job for getting sort of fast and really nice structures that can then guide structure-based drug design. So yeah, and kind of really keen to hear, like both Michelle and Ray have mentioned, about kind of preprints as well. You know, these have been fantastic in kind of seeing what's coming, if you like. You know, on the flip side, you know, things might not be as good as they first appear, so that you have to kind of take it with a little pinch of salt, but it certainly makes you aware of researchers who are working in specific areas and allows you to reach out to them. You know, I've had some fantastic conversations that have come from seeing what's appeared in preprint. So yeah, really keen to do that.
That's great. So that sort of early access to science that's really taken off recently with the likes of bioRxiv, etc. But for you, there's still, you know, that big need within the small molecules. We still need to target these coronaviruses into the future, etc. So there's a lot more, many more bites of the apple to be taken, basically, that you're looking for in that regard. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you know, it's great having vaccines, but, you know, don't forget about the small molecules. They'll be key. So
that's great. I think that's good for our audience in terms of what they'll be looking for in terms of, you know, their compound libraries that I'm sure they will have amassed, and how they're being tested and approached and put forward to industry as well. So that's great. Realizing that, you know, time is flying. The sort of the point, I guess, that we're also interested in is sort of the mechanistics of that university academic partnership, how the pandemic has affected that. I think, Michelle, you mentioned about the 3 to 5 day turnaround at Merck for reviewing content. I thought that was really interesting. Maybe that was already the case, I'm not sure. But no. I guess to go back along the line as well, and I can't remember, Ray, I think you said something about a very quick sort of turnaround when it comes to evaluating things. I don't know, Alex, I know your time at Tocris hasn't been that long when it comes to how things might have shifted. But if you would like to comment on how the pandemic has affected your mechanisms of engaging universities and academics for partnership, that would be interesting to hear. And we can move along. I know we've not got much longer left, so maybe just a couple of minutes, and then we can do a Q&A, which would be good to do.
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. You know, as I mentioned there, kind of the access to kind of bioRxiv has given a great sort of initial point of introduction to know what researchers are working on, what's coming, but also this need for speed. You know, I'll reference one compound in particular for the main protease. There was this compound 13B that was published in Science, and you know, we were very quick to kind of work and license that and get it through, and just, you know, try and get over the paperwork that can sometimes take months, where often there's kind of back and forth of these sort of superfluous additions that really don't kind of achieve anything. But yeah, realizing that there's a common goal and to get these kind of licenses sort of done and dusted nice and quick has been key, and I'd like to see more of that going forward as well. Because yeah, we are, like, our aim at Tocris is to provide tools for research, and yeah, getting those kind of sort of on the market as quick as possible is, you know, only benefits everyone.
Yeah, great. Ray?
Yeah, we got our kind of traditional channels where our licensing team, has been actioning on a lot of the COVID tools. I think we maybe have, in terms of antibodies, I think we are not adding a lot more recently, but we have more in response to what researchers needed. Like, for example, there was like not a good flow cytometry antibody for ACE2. So people have been struggling a lot. So we got so many requests from labs. So we actually went back to our archives and kind of revalidated some of those tools and brought them out. And some of our in-licensed tools we also validated too, and we found that some of them actually had a functional property that actually blocked ACE2. So those are really useful for the kind of ACE2 spike RBD interaction assays. So a lot of the pharma companies will be using a lot of the bioassays for their vaccine development. So whether it's flow cytometry, Western blotting, IHC, or an ELISA. So that those tools are very useful, and especially right now with the emergence of new variants. A lot of the companies are interested to see if their current reagents and assays work against these variants. So yeah, we've been really busy making all those spike variant proteins and validating our antibodies to those spike antigens as well. So I think those have been informed by the genome sequencing. Obviously, like COG UK has been a real driver of that, like with a huge proportion of the genome sequences being contributed here in the UK. So we're beneficiaries of that indirectly in terms of informing where we should direct our development efforts. And if there's something that's kind of a novel tool, then we're always really interested to listen, to kind of bring it in-house, or to kind of be a kind of manufacturing partner, some similar to the kind of Mount Sinai Kantaro model, where we're the kind of manufacturing partner, and we'll look after the commercial aspects of that relationship. So we're kind of interested in different models, and we've actually just launched a new licensing page as well, because we want to tell people that we are interested in in and out licensing. So that's kind of a new page on the Biotechne site.
Okay, cool. And then yeah, we've had a question that's come through, and I think it's on everyone's mind as well, which is the whole how technology is being licensed back to companies in terms of royalty-free access, whether the free patent waiver that might be sort of being passed in the US has any effect on how pharma companies and companies are engaging with research at the moment coming out of universities. So I don't know, Michelle, if you want to comment on how, I guess in general, mechanisms have changed at Merck when it comes to reviewing content, but also it would be interesting to lead into that question we've had from the Q&A, and just generally I think is on everyone's minds, what your thoughts are when it comes to these models that are being potentially put forward by the Biden administration and obviously other universities around the world.
Yep. So let's first start indeed with the mechanistics that you sort of asked about. I think there's so many ways of getting in touch with people like myself from MSD. Most of us have a LinkedIn profile. I get quite a bit of context through that. We're at a lot of different conferences, and also reach out to TTOs actively. They reach out to us. We have a website, msdlicensing.com, where people can submit their proposals, and through all these different channels, we get a lot of propositions that we then evaluate. As you said, the mechanistics are in our case in the beginning was 3 days. We still try 3 to 5 days for COVID-related activities. That's definitely not the same for other activities, I can tell you that. So you have to be a bit more patient with that. But yeah, then moving to the collaboration models, and what I see a lot is to sort of keep the speed going as well. And I think Pfizer-BioNTech was, for example, one of those collaborations that they announced it before the actual agreements had been finalized, and they didn't specify yet which terms they were working on there. I also see that with other companies and institutes, that they actually have a much more backloaded model, so rely more on solely royalties, for example, instead of also milestones. And in return, they ask from the company to make it equitable access. They make it for example, in the 140 poorest countries in the world, free of charge or at cost or something like that. So there's always this quid pro quo type of negotiations and discussions, but really people are focused around speed at the moment and to get things as quickly through, spend as little time on that. Another example is, for example, the acquisition we did last year from Themis, which I was leading on. From the first moment we started those discussions, 6 weeks later we had the agreement signed, completely done and dusted. So that's a speed that is absolutely unheard of in our case, and I don't want to become that the norm either, because those were long days, I can tell you that. How does that link to the question on not-for-profit? I'm struggling a little bit here. I think IP waivers, of course, are great for companies that can actually work with the technology or understand the underlying technology and can really use that to make a product. Ultimately, when you do tech transfer from one company to another, for example, for manufacturing purposes, there's a lot of know-how transferred as well. It's not just something that's been written in the patent. So I'm a little worried that the patents that are available might not be overly useful. It's of course great if companies then can manufacture royalty-free and without having to take that license. But to guarantee the quality, to guarantee the efficacy of the product, I think there's a lot more necessary there, and therefore I'm a little struggling to see really whether it has a lot of value or not. I must also immediately say this is my personal opinion, so it's not necessarily MSD's opinion, so I don't want to get that in the way. But yeah, I think it's definitely, if it's helpful, it's definitely a step in the right direction. For probably as long as the pandemic lasts, I understood that Biden has stated. Yeah, definitely, and I think the sooner we can get out of this and with all the tools possible, the better. Let me leave it there for a moment.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Appreciate the yeah, definitely personal opinions, etc. when it comes to these types of questions. Yeah, Alex, Ray, any comment on the sort of royalty-free access to technologies, non-exclusive, and I suppose with the Oxford AstraZeneca thing, that was, as Michelle also stated, with the IP waiver, just while the pandemic is happening, I suppose. But do you have any sort of general comments about, from your side, in terms of your businesses, how that might incentivize, disincentivize, etc.? I don't know who wants to answer that. Alex, I felt like
yeah, I can say a little bit. It was really interesting to kind of hear Michelle's opinion there, and I'd seen that Moderna had actually said they wouldn't be enforcing, like back in October, they'd said they weren't going to be enforcing any of their patents involved anyway, and that seems to have been full well in the knowledge that they know people probably aren't going to be able to make it anyway. But it seems like one of the risks in, and I should say I'm kind of sort of remaining kind of IP agnostic in this kind of COVID time, but it seems like if you kind of give anyone free range to make these sorts of vaccines, then it potentially risks removing kind of key resources that are needed for the inventors, and potentially can cause problems that way. But there's obviously kind of pros and cons either way. In terms of kind of this open science model, I think some great examples. There was this COVID moonshot effort, which is like a crowdsourced thing, and effectively kind of many sort of pharma and academic institutions have got together and put their heads together to try and design a potential clinical candidate. And sort of no IP associated whatsoever. Kind of what comes out at the end is sort of up for grabs, all with the aims of kind of facilitating and expediting this research and getting us out of a pandemic. And I think everyone has to share that common goal. But it's only right that people are rewarded for their innovations. And if you start to take away kind of IP rights from people, does that sort of incentivize people to continue doing this work? So yeah, I think there's a careful sort of line to tread with it, really. I mean, patents are kind of 20 years from the date of filing anyway, and that kind of fits in for a pharmaceutical company and kind of their phases, and they may get kind of 4 or 5 years at the end, depending on how well it goes and whether it becomes approved to actually capitalize on the IP. So yeah, the need for speed, it has changed. Things have got through much quicker. Does it need to be readdressed? I'm not sure.
Very interesting. I think we get into final thoughts, Ray, but let's just, if you did have anything you wanted to add on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think speaking on a personal view, I think there's some concerns about the IP waiver. From what I can see, like reading some of the pre-pandemic work, obviously there's a kind of fundamental discovery that's been patented. For example, the kind of pre-fusion stabilized spike protein that Barney Graham at NIH and Jason McLennan at UT Austin worked on. Those were kind of working on MERS. Those were, they were already working with Moderna for a MERS vaccine, and they, were in the right place at the right time and applied it to the COVID-19 vaccine. So those were already, patented, and a lot of the companies are already now applying low-income pricing models to their vaccines. I think J&J also came out saying they're going to, price kind of a lower point, and I think even Jason McLennan, he came out with he's not working on a hexapro 6-proline stabilized protein, and he's actually offering that as a no royalty to low-income countries. So even some of the academic inventors are conscious that the kind of equitable distribution of vaccines is going to be the key to stopping the pandemic. So pricing is a massive part of that, and I think to Mikkel's point, can some of these countries actually support the kind of like very low freezing temperatures or stabilization of these vaccines? So whether they can actually distribute them in like the Sahara, we don't know until like improvements are made. So I think we need them vaccines for different parts of the world, but I think is a really big topic of discussion about the IP, but I don't think it solves anything overnight. We're not going to get vaccines to India overnight by waiving the patent. We just need more equitable distribution. We need more innovative pharma partnering, and that's already happening in the industry. We have Novartis and everybody else chipping in Sanofi. So that activity is already happening in the industry.
Yeah, right. I think I'm getting a signal that I should wrap things up to enable Alex to come back in and do some final comments. But just to thank you all for your time on this, is much appreciated. Really interesting to hear your insights, and thanks for engaging with with InPart, and also the community and audience of TTOs and researchers that engage with us as well. So yeah, Alex, I'll let you close things up.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sure you guys could carry on all afternoon if given the chance. But yeah, obviously, need to get people off for the rest of their days. But yeah, just a few bits really. As I said, we're recording this webinar. We'll send it out early next week. We will include information about our open call for research in there. I think most people who are attending are probably aware of that already, and obviously, hopefully, this feeds into our audience's understanding of where industry is at and sort of what they're currently interested in and actively looking for, to help feed that call. Obviously trying to address what is a very important global challenge by bringing the community together. A couple of notes. Yeah, our next webinar in a few weeks' time on a similar theme around COVID, but looking at best practices that tech transfer officers have employed during the pandemic. We're going to have a panel of TTOs on there to address that question. I think that's the 3rd of June. That's mainly it really. It's just sort of wrapping up, thanking our panelists obviously for your time today. Really appreciate that, and really value your input to this. Thanks to PraxisAuril obviously for the support they've given us, getting the word out to their network with calling the webinar, and obviously thanks to all the attendees for joining us today, and hope you've all taken something good from it. So I think with that we'll wrap it up, and I'll say goodbye.
Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks
Thank you everyone.
That's it.
Cheers.
Bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye.